Are you listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other platform where you can leave a rate or review? Do you like what we're doing? If the answer to all of that is yes, please consider quickly giving us a 5-star rate. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a nice review, we greatly appreciate that as well. Okay, let's do this.
Hello, welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 281 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 9 of A Dance with Dragons, that's Davos 1.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. Unless, of course, you have a Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer tier, then we are going to spoil things for you. Regardless, we'll hopefully provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the characters and geography of this chapter. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back in North Carolina. I was visiting, well, not just Stacy and I were visiting Ethan in Western Pennsylvania. But yeah, we had a really good time. Got to see Ethan belatedly celebrate his birthday, and I get to see my mom and my aunt. They are both in the same facility right now. So this is a memory care unit.
Yeah,
facility.
I think it's a good that you said that, because it did sound a little bit like they might be in the penitentiary together.
Right, they both unfortunately suffer from Alzheimer's. They're twins, so I guess maybe one's lot was the other's lot.
I suppose so.
But so they have these, they have a nice little room, but it's not necessarily spacious. And at one point, we had 14 people in their little room. Because Stacy and I were there. Obviously, my mom and aunt were there. And then my sister and her family showed up, and my brother and his family showed up. So we had a reunion in my mom and aunt's little room.
That's fantastic. It must have looked like one of those Guinness Book of World Records of most people in a phone booth or something.
Right. It was like a clown car. So the story I had for you is that on our drive up, we left here late. Stacy had a meeting until close to 7 p.m. Thursday. So we got on the road probably about 7:30 p.m. on Thursday. And the route from North Carolina up to Western Pennsylvania, you go through a lot of really rural parts of Western Virginia. And then all of West Virginia is pretty rural. So you go, straight up through the heart of West Virginia. And at one point, this is probably 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and we are in absolutely middle of nowhere, West Virginia. I've driven this road probably more than 100 times, so I know what it looks like in the day, but this was like pitch black, and I know there is nothing in any direction for a while. Okay. But our GPS says, hey, there's traffic up ahead. It's going to slow you down 20 minutes. There's this detour that you can take that will cut right around that traffic. And Stacy's like, oh, look, a detour. It'll save us 20 minutes. And I was like, are you kidding me? Do you think I'm going to veer this car off of the beaten path in the middle of the night and take who knows what kind of roads? I don't even know if they would have been paved roads that we would have been going off onto. So she was like, okay, when we get to the exit, if we see other cars taking it, then we'll know there'll be we can all go through it together. So we get to that exit, and nobody was brave enough to take the
I'll take the 20-minute hit before I drive into the middle of nowhere.
Exactly. I'll take the traffic before I take the death detour, as I kept calling it. But then, so we hit the traffic. And it's
there was traffic. They weren't completely wrong.
No, yeah, there was traffic, and it did cost us a full 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
It was one of the kind. They were paving one lane of the road, so the 2 lanes were narrowed down to 1. And so it was one of those things where the selfless people get in the left lane and just deal with it. And And the people who think that their time is worth more than everyone else's get in the right lane, drive down to the end, and then bottleneck it by trying to cut in. Well, remember, this is a major Interstate 77, which is a major interstate here in the United States. This guy directly in front of me gets tired of it and goes over into the right lane and just camps out there. And there are these huge tractor trailers zooming up behind him, blowing their horn, trying to get him to move. And he's just not budging in his little Hyundai Elantra. And I just kept his space for him the whole time. I was like, I got your back, buddy. When it's time for you to merge in, you got a space right here in front of me. So, and traffic really, it sped up, because
of course it did.
Everybody was in line.
Right. It's like, I would give that guy a medal. You get a small one too for helping him, but he's the one who put his life on the line. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And of course, Stacey is out our window shouting at the truck drivers because they would eventually fall back and get in line, and then the next truck would come zooming up.
She'd be like, "And my husband's gonna kick your too."
No, I'm not.
I'll leave you to beep that out. Well, yeah, that's a good story. I've had very similar myself. In fact, I have it every day I drive to work. I have that because people do that on my exit from the freeway, and it annoys me so much. I mean, me. I'm a coward, and I am risk averse, and I am conflict averse. But I'll die a fiery ball of death before they pull in front of me. I tell you that.
I know. It's so tricky because you got to stay on the car in front of you, or the bumper on the car in front of you. But you don't want to hit them, and you don't want to leave too much of a gap. So it's a juggle.
Yeah. Because you're exactly right. They are causing the tailback. If they would just do what everyone else is doing, there wouldn't be a tailback to join. They are causing it.
Yeah. It's infuriating.
So I have a little story, but it's kind of funny. I have two dogs, as you know, Penny and Twiggy. And Penny loves me, and I love Penny. And I love Twiggy, but Twiggy doesn't really care for me very much. The other day, I was stroking Twiggy quite a lot. I was like rubbing her ears and sort of tickling her neck. And Penny was nudging against my hands the whole time, she could not understand what was going on. She was just like, and Carson observed. She said, "You are literally torturing both dogs at the same time," because all Penny wanted was what Twiggy was getting, and all Twiggy wanted was to be left alone.
Was to not get what Twiggy was getting.
I was like, "Yeah, I'm torturing them both."
Oh, that's funny.
All right. Well, anyway, let's get down to business. How did we leave Davos Seaworth? God, it's Davos. Last time we saw Davos is actually present in a chapter was fully 2 books ago in a book that was apparently called A Storm of Swords, but I've long since forgotten that. He was secretly getting Edric Storm away from from Dragonstone and the fiery death that awaited him. That earned him a close encounter with Lightbringer, which might have ended up with Davos dead had he not used his newfound reading skills to inform Stannis of the danger to the north. It seemed that his story time had an effect on Stannis as the king sailed north to the aid of the Night's Watch. Davos was left at Eastwatch by the sea with Queen Cersei. Since then, he's reportedly been captured by the Manderleys of White Harbour and subsequently executed at the behest of Cersei to earn back Wyman's son and heir Willis. However, before you get all excited that this chapter means he isn't dead, let me point out that this is back in time, so that everything I've just recapped may yet come to pass.
Right.
Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
All right. As a storm rages, Davos is brought before Lord Godric Borrell, Lord of Sweetsister, the central of the 3 islands known as the 3 Sisters. Lord Godric's keep is Breakwater in Sisterton. The captain of guard announces that they found Davos in the belly of the whale attempting to seek passage off the island.
They confiscated 12 gold dragons and a black velvet ribbon with 3 beeswax seals. Hearing the tide rushing through the dungeons below, Davos fears that he may end up drowning down there. Then he thinks better. A king's hand would be more valuable sold to Queen Cersei than killed like a common criminal. The Lord considers the ribbon and wants to see Davos's hands. Any man can steal a ribbon, but the fingers, or lack thereof, prove the identity of the Onion Knight.
Davos doesn't deny it. Lord Godric wants to know why he was in the belly of the whale in the first place. Has he returned to his smuggling ways? No, he sought passage to White Harbor as King Stannis sent him with a message for Lord Wyman Manderley. Godric asks what brought him to Sweetsister. Davos considers the truth, betrayal by a friend. Davos and Salladhor Saan left Eastwatch with 29 ships. Davos would be surprised if even half still survived. Storms wreaked havoc during their journey south to White Harbor, sinking many and scattering even more, as though an angry god was getting revenge for the smooth voyage they had north.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
Salladhor had reached the limits of his patience with Stannis regarding the lack of payment for Salladhor's support. Davos tries to reassure him, but to no avail, then reminded him that if Salladhor left Stannis' service now, he'd forfeit any chance of recouping the gold he was owed. Davos knew the day would eventually come when Salladhor's loyalty ran dry.
Storms is Davos' response to how he ended up on Sweetsister. Godric instructs the captain to leave Davos with him and adds that Davos was never here. Godric admits that if he were to make Davos' presence known, his liege lord Tristan Sunderland would insist Davos be turned over to him. Davos would then be promptly sold to Queen Cersei. Godric asks where Salladhor Saan went. He was seen off several ports along their journey. He's returned to the Stepstones for piracy, but he can't let it be known that Salah has abandoned Stannis, leaving him without a fleet.
So Davos makes up a story about Stannis sending Salladhor Saan south to harass the Lannisters. Davos then admits he arrived in an open boat. Godric wonders if Stannis would ransom Davos, and Davos wonders the same thing. Regardless, the king has no coin to pay for it. He tells Godric he would need to write to Castle Black to find out for himself. Godric asks if the imp is also at Castle Black. Davos is confused by the question. He's at the Red Keep, condemned to die for the death of Joffrey. Godric informs him that the imp has escaped after killing his father.
The news stuns Davos. Tywin Lannister is dead? This changes everything. He begs leave to send a raven to Castle Black, but Godric forbids it. Stannis will not learn the news through Godric. He wants no part in aiding Stannis. However, he will feed Davos, and Davos is glad for it. Aside from being starving, it also protects him under guest right, and even these pirates on the Three Sisters will respect that ancient law.
Godric thought Stannis burned his hand. Davos thinks of Lord Alistair Florent and how Melisandre burned him alive to deliver a steady wind to carry them from Dragonstone to Eastwatch. Davos misliked that breeze, which smelled to him of burning flesh. Godric tells of how he came by the expensive seasonings in their meal. Davos knows how sistermen are known to mislead unsuspecting ships into rocks and then pillage the wreckage.
Godric says the storm did Davos a favor blowing him here instead of White Harbor. Lord Wyman plans to bend the knee to King Tommen. A Lannister ship full of Freys returned the bones of Wyman's younger son Wendell. Furthermore, Wyman and Lord Walder Frey have agreed on a marriage pact between the families. The news devastates Davos. His king needs White Harbor to have any shot at winning the North. He must still try to win Wyman to Stannis' cause. He pleads with Godric to send him to White Harbor. But Godric wants to know why he should help Stannis.
Because the lion is dead, is his answer. Godric admits that if Sir Kevin were Tommen's regent, Davos would already be in chains, yet it's the Queen who rules. Davos realises the man has doubts and wants to pick the right side. Davos pounces. Stannis held Storm's End against the Tyrells and the Red Wines, smashed the Iron Fleet and took Dragonstone from the Targaryens. This boy king will not defeat him. Godric is not sold, but he recalls something Ned Stark told his father when he sat in this very chamber. Only winter is certain.
This news also surprises Davos. Ned Stark was here? Godric explains that when Robert's rebellion was in its infancy, Ned came through the Bight to get back to Winterfell. Along the way, his ship was caught in a storm. The captain drowned, but the man's daughter saw Stark safely to the sisters. Stark left the woman with a bag of silver and a bastard in her belly. A boy she named Jon, after Jon Arryn. Huh. How about that?
Yes. Well, I told you, because I'd read ahead, I actually knew there was going to be a bit of a reveal here. Well, the thing about Jon's story is there's always the chance that people are wrong.
Yes.
Because I have noticed, the more I think about it, the more I think that if half the people who have a theory about Jon's birthright are correct, then Ned was nothing like the person I knew him to be. Right. He slept with every woman in the kingdom.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right, though. Everyone seems to have a theory, and we'll get to some of those theories here in short time.
Yeah. I wanted to give everyone a sense of where this was going on. So, full location understanding. The Three Sisters lie in the Bight, which is a major bay, possibly even a gulf. I was trying to learn the geographical difference between a bay and a gulf. I think bay is the correct term.
Okay.
So the Bight is this major bay on the east coast of Westeros, which separates on its south side are the Mountains of the Moon in the Vale, and its north side is the north, specifically White Harbour. The western edge of the Bight, where it hits Westeros, is basically it abuts the neck, so it's kind of like that's a sort of desolate shore without much habitation. The sea to the south of the Bight is known as the Narrow Sea, and north is known as the Shivering Sea. I don't know technically whether the Bight counts as being part of the Narrow Sea or the Shivering Sea. By geography, I would say possibly the Shivering Sea, because if you go due east, you skip over the top of Essos. So I would say the Narrow Sea is where Essos is there. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah. I agree. Makes sense.
Yeah. The Three Sisters are, by repute, dens of iniquity.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, so the path that Salladhor, Davos, and the ships took south from Eastwatch to the Bight basically takes up the entire of the what is considered the north, like south of the wall north.
Yeah.
So they're sailing down the Shivering Sea and then the Narrow Sea southward. But to get to White Harbor, they have to sail about halfway into the Bight and then go north up into the White Knife, the river that runs through the north. So it sounds like Sala must have left Davos around the mouth of the Bight.
Yes.
No pun intended. It's pun slightly intended. Okay, I'm being honest. And that he had to row the rest of the way west to get to the sisters. It would have been okay. Sala was angry. He's losing ships and money left and right. He's fed up with not getting what he was promised, and so I'm guessing he didn't want to then sail all the way into the Bight, all the way up north into the the White Knife where White Harbor is, and so he said, "Listen, you got to take a right turn here, and I'm going straight. You can come with me straight if you want, but if you're gonna go where you're supposed to go, you're gonna have to hop in a dinghy and row your way in." Yeah.
I gotta say, I find it hard to blame Salladhor.
Yeah, me too.
He's done his bit. He's fought in various dangerous places for Stannis. He's not Westerosi, right? I mean, he's from Essos, isn't he?
He's Lyseni, yeah.
He's Lyseni, yeah. So he doesn't owe Stannis any loyalty at all. I mean, almost any Westerosi, you could say, I don't really care about your opinions on this. He's your king, and you need to do what he says.
True.
But he's not Sallador's king. So Sallador's in it for the money, and he's seen nothing
Right.
for these efforts to this point.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, it is a difficult decision for Sallador, because we all have this cognitive bias towards sunk costs.
Right.
It's why people double down on bad investments, because they think, well, I need to recoup that money I've already lost. If he betrays him now, he's getting nothing, but he's getting nothing anyway. So cutting your losses at this point makes a lot of sense to me, I've got to say.
Yeah. That theory, that feeling of, well, I'm this far in, I gotta win it all back. I gotta do whatever to get it back. That's how those huge resorts were built in the desert of Las Vegas. That exact feeling of not willing to cut your losses. But
all those empty lots of sand and tumbleweeds in Vegas are where that didn't happen. There aren't any of those.
I feel for Salah. He gambled on Stannis and he lost, and he finally decided, you know what? I got to cut my losses here. I've already now, not only have I wasted all this time, I've now lost half of my fleet, and I've seen nothing for it. It's time for me to keep going.
I will say, I think George Martin is a little overzealous on the sinking of ships. If ships sank as easily as ships sink in this book, no one would ever become a sailor.
Well, you're right. Yeah, they do sink a lot.
I mean, that's half these ships. I mean, and the thing is, I will say, I think there's danger when you're going from continent to continent, because you've got to cross an ocean. There you have no cover from a storm. But they were coming down the side of a continent here. When the storms raged, they could have pulled in and weathered the storm out in bays, nooks and crannies that they could find.
True.
These were experienced sailors. They know how to survive a storm, but it just feels like, I mean, obviously some of this is sort of like the omens of the journey, under Melisandre's magic, they were able to get to the north easily, but without that, they're struggling against the winds. Fine, I get it. But just to lose half of 29 ships to some storms when you had ways around it, or at least ways to mitigate, just feels a little bit scorched earth of George Martin, if you ask me.
he had to get Salah to get frustrated to the point where he was willing to quit Stannis.
True, but flip side of that is Salah was about to share all of this wealth he'd clearly earned with 29 ships. Now he only has to share it with 14 ships. So
that's true. Yeah, that's true. The cuts keep getting bigger as the losses mount. But so Davos thinks to himself that he saw this coming. He was fond of the old rogue, referring to Salah, but never foolish enough to trust him. And I thought that was kind of unfair. I think Salah has done all that he's been asked to this point.
Yes.
He never broke trust. He trusted Stannis, who failed to hold his promise. He also tried to save Davos's life when Davos returned to Dragonstone, hell-bent on killing Melisandre. So he's done
if Salladhor
his duty.
Yeah, if Salladhor comes back with a ship full of Lannister soldiers, right, that is when you don't trust Salladhor anymore. But when Salladhor gives up on your hopeless cause, that's not a lack of trust. That is common sense you're blaming him for.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, his taking them north was already a step too far. So I'm going to take you north so you can fight some nameless dread at the wall where we all freeze for months on end. That's the plan. And how is this going to make you richer so you can pay your debt to me?
Right. I need half up front.
Exactly. Can we not do something that leads to a big pot of money? Whatever you got, of your plans lead to gold. Let's do that one. What if we take Casterly Rock? How about that one?
Right. Now, Davos is concerned that word is going to get out that Salah has left Stannis' service and also left Stannis without a fleet. But what Davos doesn't know is that the Iron Throne also has no fleet, because Orain Waters took off with the new Drommons that he was commissioned to build when Cersei was arrested. So
right. Although, of course, that hasn't happened at this point, I assume. That's still to come in the future.
Yes, you are right. Yes, good point. Yeah.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
So, Davos gets news which is so old for us that it's almost ridiculous that he's getting this news. But he learns that Tywin Lannister is dead, and this is amazing. And of course, because this is the telephone game of news, the news of how Tywin died is amazing.
Right.
Tyrion did a backflip. Wait, no, actually Tyrion did do a backflip. No, I remember.
Right, yeah, no, that was real.
But he wriggled through the bars of his cell to get out and then ripped them apart with his bare hands, fleeing the Red Keep bathed in blood. It's a little bit... You might begin to doubt the truth of the core story when you hear all those details.
True, yes. Yeah. Who would have ever thought that Tyrion had it in him all this time to rip someone apart with his bare hands? Yeah, so then Davos thinks, well, this changes everything. And he wants to get a word to Castle Black to let Stannis know, you've been planning and fearing that you're going to have to deal with Tywin. Well, guess what? You don't have to do that anymore. So, then how will the news of Tywin's death affect Stannis' plan if and when he learns of it?
Yeah, I mean, presumably he'll learn of it eventually, even if Godric refuses to let Davos send a bird to Castle Black now. But which is interesting because he refuses to do it because he doesn't want to be seen to be aiding Stannis. But I'm like, how would that come back to bite you? So you send a letter, which you get Davos to write and Davos to sign. Okay. Yeah. So Tommen wins the war, kills Stannis, kills everybody. And then he sends a secret mission to Castle Black to find out who sent that bird.
Let me find the exact bird that flew into Castle Black.
Right.
At that point.
And what do you do with it? Because the thing is, this is a homing pigeon or a homing raven of some sort. So once released, it will fly back to Sisterton, right? That's where it's going to go. But how would you know? You're going to put a note on its leg that says, whoever receives this bird, please turn yourself in at King's Landing for some punishment because you betrayed us. or do you follow it? Do you chase after it?
Right. Where's that bird going? Follow that bird.
How cowardly is Sir Godric? I would be like, come on, it's a bird. Lend it to me.
I did have that thought. Yeah. Once the bird takes off, you should be all right.
Yeah. Unless it goes to King's Landing. It flies off. It's a Lannister bird. Look what this guy's trying to tell people.
Oh, yeah.
Better still, get Davos to write the letter that says, amazing news, Tywin is dead. I'm here in White Harbour having a lovely time. Your friend, Davos.
Right. Doesn't Godric have anyone that he would like to, has ill will toward that he could say? The bird came from there.
You see, if he was Peter Baelish, he would have him sign that and say, I write this from the Eyrie, where I'm being hosted and dined by Peter Baelish.
Right. Oh, yeah. But you don't think... So Stannis learns this news finally. No, and if he knew the disarray that King's Landing was in by the end of A Feast for Crows, which of course hasn't happened yet, but Cersei arrested, fleet stolen, the Red Wine fleet has left to go defend the Reach. Might he consider sailing for King's Landing? Of course he can't, because Saul's gone and left him.
I think the person who needs to know all this is Euron Greyjoy, because he'd be like, wait a second, now's my moment.
Yeah, he just might.
Yeah. Or indeed, Daenerys I've got little munchkin dragons Targaryen.
Right, yeah.
Because you're absolutely right. There's absolute disarray by the end of these books. And so why not just sail in and take it? It wouldn't take much.
Yeah. Now, of course, there are 2 Tyrell armies descending on King's Landing, and they have reached out to Kevin to resume his regency, possibly, or not resume his regency, resume the regency.
Right.
Possibly fixing some of the messes. But, by the time of Feast for Crows ends, none of that had come to pass yet.
So, Davos mentions Melisandre's R'hllor magic. Again, nobody likes it, but nobody can deny its power because it does what it does. There was a very famous TV commercial in England about it was a wood stain, and the commercial was, it does what it says on the can. And basically on the can it says seals wood, It was like, the TV commercial was, does what it says on the can. R'hllor's magic does what it says.
Yeah, right.
You want something to happen? Get R'hllor on your side and he'll do it.
Seriously.
Because
no wonder he's so popular in Essos.
All right. Why isn't Essos just taking over Westeros with, R'hllor on its side? But because this one is basically getting the fleet north, not only rapidly, but without any bad weather, on a favourable wind. Which Davos, I'm thinking rewriting history or just letting a little poetry see. Now he can read and write. He's got an all poetic. He's smelled the smell of burnt flesh on the wind the whole time. Yeah, right, whatever. No one's buying what you're selling.
And the wind sounded like screams, I think, too.
Yes,
right?
Of course, it would. It would. With hindsight. And
Yeah. Now, okay, so some of Melisandre's magic possibly can be chalked up to coincidence. The kings and the leeches that she burned with Edric's blood. Kings at war often die.
Yeah.
But others are harder to explain, such as this weirdly steady southern wind that blew them straight to Eastwatch by the sea. So,
actually, but I will say, if you think about it, if there is a war between 4 kings, say, burning 3 leeches and saying, that's taking care of 3 of them, is a pretty safe bet.
Right. Yeah, that's
there's no real room for 4, or indeed 3 or 2, but there is room for 1, so at some point she'll be right.
Yes.
One last thing I'll say about that is, I bet this journey south, the wind was full of screams as 15 of the ships sank. And the sailors were all lost. So let's not all be blaming Melisandre for everything here.
Right. Now the winds were bought at the expense of Alistair Florent, who was burned as a sacrifice for said winds. Now we know Alistair mostly because he was Davos's cellmate on Dragonstone.
Right.
Celly, as sometimes I believe cellmates might be called, at least according to prison TV shows that I've watched over the years.
And your mum and aunt.
That's right. And also Davos thinks about the deal that Alistair was trying to cut that got Alistair into such hot water, or such hot flames, as it were, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And just a reminder of what that deal was, he was trying to make peace with the Lannisters by offering that Stannis would give up the Iron Throne if he could retain Lord of Storm's End and Dragonstone. And he offered to seal the pact with a wedding between Tommen and Shireen Baratheon. So that was what he was trying to negotiate, and Stannis really took umbrage with it and had him arrested. Now, Alistair's brother Axel told Davos that he wanted both Alistair, his brother, and Davos to burn, and that Axel would be named Hand of the King. And he actually threatened Davos with death if Davos didn't recommend Axel as Hand of the King, which ultimately ended up going to Davos anyway.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Lord Godric expresses doubts about Cersei's rule, which is interesting, because I can get that the news of Tywin's murder would reach there, but Cersei's misrule feels a
I
little bit
know.
more down in the weeds.
I was thinking that too. I was thinking, wow, news must be really spreading of her misrule for it to make it all the way to the three sisters in the bite in
Yeah.
the middle of nowhere, basically.
Although I'll bet, as a sort of outpost of pirates and smugglers that it is, that they do a huge trade in gossip.
Yeah,
I bet
I bet
gossip
you're right.
is like one of the biggest currencies in the Three Sisters is gossip. So that's possibly why, even though you're right, it feels like it's an outpost of civilization, it may actually have quite a good handle on this kind of thing. Some of it exaggerated, like Tywin's murder, but some of it on point, like Cersei's misrule.
Yeah, it's just like, who is spreading, who knows enough about the specific rules that Cersei is being misguided in the creation of, outside of her smallest council and those in the Red Keep.
But I mean, okay, who are these people going to interact with when they're in King's Landing? It's going to be the citizens of Flea Bottom, the prostitutes. They are going to talk about how the people suffered in King's Landing and how the only people who've looked after them are the Tyrells. And this Cersei woman is horrible. That story is going to reach ears, I'm sure, and reach the ears of pirates and smugglers more easily than it's going to reach the ears of captains of legitimate ships, because they're not going to hang out there as easily.
Of course, Kevin comes out smelling like a rose.
Oh, very good.
Because Godric says, if Kevin were ruling, you'd be in chains already. But it's the Queen that's ruling, so...
Yeah, which goes to the fact that this is all calculation for Godric. He has no loyalty to Stannis, has no loyalty to anyone. He's just calculating, where are my best chances? And if Kevin was in charge, his best chances would be the Lannisters and Davos would be in chains. But he isn't, and the rumours of the misrule give him reason to think Stannis might still win this, so Davos can go on his merry way.
So you're saying I've got a chance.
Exactly. And fair enough to Lord Godric. I mean, you've got to look after number one, I guess, but that isn't an attitude that sits very well with Stannis, just FYI.
That is true. So we got some exciting news. We started, we led our general discussion here with the news of another contender for Jon Snow's mother.
Is she another contender, or has she been muted before? I did wonder about this, because I thought we'd heard of a fisherman's daughter before. Is this not her? Or am I just making it up?
I would assume that there's only one fisherman's daughter.
Right, but had we heard that before?
I can't recall hearing that. Okay. It's possible. I just can't recall.
I think maybe I've read enough things where I've seen it listed as a candidate, and I didn't realize we hadn't got to that point until today. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sure. Yeah, that could be.
Yeah. So the candidates we have now are Ashara Dane, who was a good candidate because she was beautiful, and Ned definitely met her, and she killed herself at the end of the war because of the death of her brother, Arthur.
Well, all we know is that she died of a broken heart.
Oh, that's right. She didn't kill herself necessarily.
She did. She threw herself off a tower, but she did so because of the broken heart.
Right. Yeah. So was her heart broken because Ned was rejecting her, because her brother died, because Ned was stealing her baby?
Right. Yeah. All
There's
those.
Plenty.
Yeah. So they met at the tournament at Harrenhal, the famous tourney at Harrenhal. And
there were doughy eyes between them, right?
Yes, there were. Yes, yeah. And Edric, Ned.
you know what it is, Mackelly? I'm a sucker for a love story. That's what
you
it is.
are. You fall for the love stories. You definitely do.
You know what? Yeah. I watched the finale of The Bachelor last night. Right, The Bachelor is the lowest of the low of television, right? I cried twice.
Well, hey,
and neither time at the state of my life.
that would have been a possibility, I guess.
That's the only excusable one.
So here's some details we know about Ashara and Ned. So Edric Dane, also known as Ned, he is the little lord of Starfall, which is where House Dane, the seat of House Dane. He told Arya that his Aunt Ashara and Ned, not him, but Ned Stark, fell in love at the tourney at Harrenhal. So that, that goes back to what you were saying. There was some doughy eyes between the two of them. But they also, like you said, met 2 years later at the end of the Robert's Rebellion when Ned returned Arthur's bones to Starfall. Okay, here's the problem with those two, though. Neither of those options meet the time frame very well. And we talked about this ages ago.
Yeah. But I remember.
I think, yeah.
Because if the Congress happened 2 years earlier, John would be noticeably older than Rob, and he isn't.
Right.
That's the problem.
It's hard to mask a 2-year-old as a newborn.
Exactly. So the only possibility for it to be Ashara is that there is a secret tryst rendezvous in the middle of that.
Right. Yeah.
And there's nothing to suggest that happened.
Does not. George Martin did say that Ashara was not chained to Starfall. It's possible she could have gone out, left the castle and met up with Ned somewhere. But also, if it happened...
But hang on, George Martin. So she's, 20?
Yeah, I don't know exactly her age off the top of my head.
Let's say 20 for the sake of argument, right? She's 20, the most beautiful woman in the kingdom, in the Seven Kingdoms. Right? There's a war going on. The whole world is up in flames. Everybody's fighting. And she says, Dad, I'm just popping out.
I'll be back in a bit. I need to stretch my legs.
Well, apparently she did. I'm just not buying that, George. The Danes are going to be like, the heck you are.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So then if the baby was conceived at Harrenhal, then that's before he met Kat, which means there's no real reason to keep that detail a secret.
Well, true. Although the one thing about that is, I will say that at least fits with Ned's character, that he didn't betray Kat.
Right. Yes.
Because that's the one sort of stumbling block for most of these things with Ned, is that it's hard to imagine him betraying Kat. But if he was not betrothed to Kat, then there is no betrayal.
Right. So why not tell Kat? Possibly because he doesn't want to put any shame on Ashara for conceiving a child out of wedlock, maybe?
But she's dead. She's dead.
Yeah. And if it's true, and you tell Kat, I fathered this child with Ashara before we met. Possibly there's less of a grudge that she holds against Jon, and maybe Jon's life is better at Winterfell.
But again, the real problem, all of that makes perfect sense what you're saying, but it's the fact that Jon isn't noticeably years older. Or at least 1 year older. That's the thing that would really, that undermines this as a theory to me.
Yeah. And if he was conceived when Ned went back to Starfall to deliver Arthur's bones, he'd be way too young.
Right. And also, Ned's got to kick around for 9 months waiting for him to arrive.
And then, right. That's true. Yes. All right. So that's Ashara. Next, we have Willa, who is a wet nurse at Starfall. And Ned Dane told Ashara that she is Jon's mother. So that's out of Ned Dane's mouth to Arya. So the question there is, okay, if you put those two things that Ned Dane has told Arya together, it sounds like the second one is a cover story for the first one. It does.
That's what it sounds like. I mean,
right.
The kid is too stupid to realize that he's giving the game away by saying those two things. Your father was in love with my aunt, and then her friend, this lady over here, gave birth to Ned's son. That's not how it works, Ned. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I take your point. But he's not the only Ned to say that. Ned Stark told Robert Baratheon
that it was
that
Willa.
she was Jon's mother as well,
Right.
when they were riding south to King's Landing.
The Neds got their Neds together and said, all right, here's the story.
Right. We're going with Willa.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the timing is tricky, because when and how during Robert's rebellion would Ned have had the opportunity to meet and bed Willa if she's in service to Starfall in Dorne?
I will say, if Willa said, I'm just popping out and went missing for 3 months, that would be less of a story at Starfall
Right.
than Ashara going out and coming back 3 months later, pregnant.
Yeah, that's true. They might be like, okay, well, be safe out there.
Let us get the door for you. Sorry.
Now, we don't know when Willa went into service at Starfall. Possibly Ned bedded her earlier, brought her to Starfall when he delivered Arthur's bones, and she decided to stay there as a wet nurse, and Ned took Jon with him.
Yeah, that took a bit of forward planning. So he meets Willa randomly, and he's like, you know what, that was really fun, thanks, I really appreciate it. If you happen to be pregnant, then in about 9 months I'll be swinging by Starfall with some bones.
Meet me there.
Meet me there.
Yeah. That's that one. Yeah. So that's Willa. That's what we know about Willa. Again.
Yeah, anyway,
some
we
plot
can
holes.
dispense with this because now we have the truth. It's some fisherman's
Right.
daughter from the sisters.
The fisherman's daughter who named the baby Jon after Jon Arryn. Now, of the 3 women that we're discussing here, she would know the best about Jon Arryn if she's from the Bight area. And the description said that her father was a fisherman, not a merchant. So it seems like he likely was. They lived in the Bight, the
Right. Okay.
coast of the Bight. So, but George Martin said that Ned most likely named Jon, which would explain naming him Jon after Jon Arryn, because he was like a foster father to him.
Right.
So I don't know that those two things could happen I don't know that Ned could name Jon while he's fighting Robert's Rebellion and the baby is born somewhere on the Bight. Possibly, I guess, when he learns of this boy, he goes to the Bight, retrieves him, and says, I'm going to name you Jon. And the fisherman's daughter said, wait, I named him Sam.
Yeah. It don't matter. If I throw a stick and shout fetch, he's not going to answer either way. He's a baby.
Right.
I can change his name all I want.
But this one was definitely before he married Kat, because he was leaving the Eyrie for Winterfell before he even rode south and eventually ending up at River Run to marry Kat. So it was not infidelity. So again, why would he keep this a secret? Simply because he didn't marry the girl and he was ashamed and embarrassed by that?
But it is after the tourney of Harrenhal, so at least this child would be younger than the Ashara child would have been.
Yes, the age might work. But so here's I was saying, was it simply because he didn't marry her and that's why, he's embarrassed and ashamed? I don't know. Protecting the honor of random small folk is oddly honorable even for Ned Stark. So he claims that this affair happened after he was married to Kat. If the fisherman's daughter is the mother to Jon Snow, why would he intentionally lie and say, no, this actually was an affair, when it clearly wasn't an affair? And I was thinking on that, if we were to believe the fisherman's daughter version, possibly he's lying to lessen the concern about Jon being his eldest son and heir and having a more threatening claim to Robb as his, as the future Lord of Winterfell.
So, because of the age or because of the
Yes.
state of his wedlock at the point of conception?
because of his age.
Because of his age, right.
Because he would been born, he'd be older than Robb.
Right, he would be tangibly older, not close in age, but definitely older.
Yeah, at least a few months or so.
Yeah. So when he impregnated the fisherman's daughter, he was on his way to Winterfell to marry Cat.
Not yet. He was on his way to Winterfell to rally his troops, then head south. Then he married Cat.
Where did he marry Cat?
River Run with
John
Arryn, when John Arryn married Lysa.
Okay. And then impregnated her with Robb straight away.
Yes.
Okay. So it's close enough to be I see what you mean. It's that story, the timeline clearly shows Jon's older. But the timeline is close enough that Jon and Robb could pass for, twins.
Yes. Or you could say, no, I had an affair on you. It was 2 weeks after I met you,
Right.
So but Robb is still older.
Right.
Yeah.
It has to be afterwards, otherwise he's the older. Yeah, that's I think you've thought that through very well.
Oh, thank you. I do that sometimes. I try not to make a habit of it, though.
I mean, if this is all true, I mean, again, there's still none of these stories are completely compelling.
No, they're not. There's plot holes in each one of them that are almost fatal.
Yep, for sure. So the quest goes on. Jon Snow, we will find your mother one day. I promise.
We hope so.
I will say that this tying in Davos's presence here is an echo of this past conflict when Ned was here. It's a lovely piece of storytelling. I think that's really nice. Sort of like history repeating itself. Sort of like one generation later.
I like that.
It goes to the sort of the size of the canvas that he's painted here. George Martin gives us the opportunity to stumble across these new clues and insights to stories that we think we've exhausted the possibilities. I mean, in many ways, I now am relying on magic to get to the bottom of Jon Snow's mom. I think
ask
magic
for lore.
Right. Well, no, I actually think ask the Green Seers, ask the Three-Eyed Crow. That's where I think the answer will come from. But the story is so rich and vast that you can still find threads of it here and there, and it arises naturally. You know what I mean? This doesn't feel like it was shoehorned in. It was to a certain extent, but it didn't feel that way. It felt like the conversation that Sir Godric would have with Davos.
Yeah, it was good. It was well done. But speaking of Godric, what's he gonna do now? Does he turn Davos in, help him get to White Harbor, or just let him go and let him find his own way? He seems like an opportunistic man, but it doesn't seem anyway. When this chapter ended, it doesn't seem like he's going to turn around and sell Davos to Cersei.
No, that's the one thing I think you can safely rule out, because he ruled that out himself when he said if Kevin was in charge, you'd already be on your way.
Right.
Because if you're not already on your way, then you're not going to send him back. Even if on reflection you think that's still probably the safest bet, you're not going to do it now, because now there's an honor amongst thieves kind of thing that's going to make him go, all right, I'll let you go.
Yeah,
and like you were saying, he's actually going to get out of there, I really don't know. But I think Sir Godric is not going to prevent him.
Yeah, and like you were saying, based on the story about Ned, it seems he will either send him on or allow him to just make his own way. Disavowing him from ever having been in Breakwater. You were never here,
right?
Because it just, like you said, the two stories are mirroring each other a generation apart. There's a precedent set by his father. Ned was here. He was a rebel. He let him pass through. Davos is here. He's a rebel. There's precedent to let him pass through.
Yep.
But regardless of what Godric does, we do know that Davos gets to White Harbor. So
we do. Oh, yeah. What am I talking about? I know he's going to let him go to White Harbor, because that's where Davos is going to get hung, drawn, and quartered, whatever's going to happen to him.
Yeah, Cersei has him killed, and the Freys verify it. And they get Willis Manderly, the Wyman's son and heir, back for the effort, which we saw Jaime free Willis from Harrenhal. But Davos is is our POV, so we will get to see it all play out, which might be hard to watch unfold because I think we're all pretty fond of Davos.
Yeah, we were fond of Ned.
We were, yes.
It doesn't stop George Martin from snicking their heads off. Just to be clear.
And it is about time, I guess.
Yes, it's been a while since we've gratuitously lost a POV unexpectedly.
It's just hard to imagine the Manderleys willingly siding with the Freys and the Lannisters after the betrayal of Wendell, killed in the Red Wedding with guest right protection.
Yeah.
And Willis rotting away as a captive in Harrenhal.
Even Sisterton has, even they wouldn't break guest rights.
Yes,
they're pirates and smugglers and shipbreakers. But they wouldn't betray guest rights.
I noticed that line in the chapter. That he felt safe because even these scumbags aren't going to break guest right, which just shows you how the phrase must be viewed in the in the realm.
Lowest of the low.
But I do get that they're surrounded. I do get that the Manderleys are surrounded by Lannister supporters right now. They've got the Freys below the neck, the Boltons nearby, and are now Wardens of the North. So, I get it. I don't know. It would be awfully hard to agree to a wedding pact with the Freys for the same family that killed your son in such treacherous fashion. But got to do what you have to do to get your son back, I guess.
I suppose so. Yeah. All right, let's move on. How about some spoilers? If you want the spoilers, you need to join us at our Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer levels, at the upper levels of that, and then you get the spoiler section. And let me tell you, it's always interesting, especially if you've got a memory like me, because it's full of stuff you do not remember. All right, thank you for the spoilers, Mackelly. Excellent as always. What about some background?
Well, Lord Godric tells Davos that despite the Northmen conquering the Three Sisters 2,000 years ago, in what was known as the Rape of the Three Sisters, Sistermen still harbor ill will toward the North. Godric says that they had to bend the knee to the Eyrie to boot the Northmen out, and he's referring to a war between the Starks and the Arryns known as the War Across the Water, also known as the Worthless War. The Three Sisters, as Godric tells us, were once ruled by regional kings until the Starks grew tired of the pirating and pillaging stemming from the small archipelago. It's said that during the conquering of the Three Sisters, the Northmen committed many atrocities. Some of those alleged awful acts include killing children and cooking them in pots, disemboweling men and winding their entrails around spits, and executing 3,000 warriors in a single day at the headman's mount. And Balthasar Bolton is said to have made a pink pavilion out of the flayed skins of 100 sistermen. Now,
Bolton's gonna Bolton.
That's right. Unsurprisingly, northern accounts of the war do not mention any of these actions. So, they do say history is written by the winner, but I guess if you're on the Three Sisters, it's written by you all, I guess.
Yes. Nobody reads that.
Right. So to get the aid they needed to expel the Northmen, the Sistermen agreed to owe fealty to King Mathas the Second Arryn rather than the Stark King. Thus began a 1,000-year-long war. King Mathas sailed for the Three Sisters at the head of a 100-ship flotilla, and control of the islands changed hands about a dozen times, with both sides seeing victories and defeats. The northern castle known as the Wolf's Den was besieged by one Arryn king and burned by another, and the Starks attacked Gulltown and burned hundreds of ships in the harbor. But eventually, the Starks relented, and the fighting finally just came to an end. In a consideration of history by Archmaester Peristan, he wrote, "For 10 long centuries the direwolf and the falcon had fought and bled over 3 rocks, until one day the wolf awoke as if from a dream and realized it was only stone between his teeth, whence he spat it out and walked away."
Interesting. I did not know any of that, Mackelly. That's interesting background.
Well,
it's all news to me.
now you know it for the next few weeks. Till you forget again.
That's generous. Thank you. Comparison with a television show. Davos' storyline has now completely diverged. He stays with Stannis at Castle Black, not at Eastwatch, and essentially never leaves his side. He is witness at Castle Black to much that we have seen, including Jon's election. I said election, and so on. But yeah, nothing, no comparison with the TV show for this chapter. And pedantry, right. I didn't have anything apart from all the things that I've already voiced.
I know. I was thinking as you were bringing them up, maybe we should have saved some of this for pedantry.
But a lot of it, well, I mean, the big one, the one that really isn't a character decision, is a George Martin decision to sink all those ships. And it just feels like, wow, man, you've got power of life and death over these poor people, and you are using it like Zeus, throwing down thunderbolts.
Yeah, we were saying it's been a while since a beloved character was killed off, but hasn't been a while since just general people have been killed
Maybe
off.
I should stop complaining. Let him get his bloodlust out on the rank and file, you know?
Yes.
Keep Davos alive.
Yes, true.
News and notes.
Well, I only have one bit of news for everyone today, and it's that we finally have a date for filming to begin on House of the Dragon Season 3. It's set to begin on March 31st, which is today if you're a sustainer, or yesterday if you're not, and in both instances if you're listening the day that the episode drops. Okay, well, even that date is actually still speculation. We've been told for a while that filming will begin in March, and showrunner Ryan Condal recently said that filming will begin right after daylight saving time begins in England, or I guess it's called British summertime. So that's
yes, that's correct. That's when the clocks changed. They changed from Greenwich Mean Time to British summertime. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that date is set
but you know what's different? We don't call the event daylight savings.
Just British summer. It begins British summertime.
Exactly. It's the thing that starts British summertime. It's the clocks going forward. We call it the clocks going forward. You know. But
okay.
Here you call the event daylight savings as well as
yes. Yeah. Right. That's a good clarification you have there. Well, that date when the clocks move forward is set for March 30th. So if we which
is good for me, by the way, because for 3 weeks of the year, my calculation that I have to do when I'm communicating to Europe, to my family, is off by an hour. Because normally it's 5 hours to the UK, 6 hours to France.
Yes.
But for the last 3 weeks, it's been 4 hours to the UK, 5 hours to France. And on Sunday, it's going to sort itself out again. Yeah. We'll be back to normal.
Go back. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There you go. You just had to suffer through that for a few weeks.
I know. It's confusing as heck.
So if we take the filming begins in March with the after the clocks change over, it adds up to but one possibility.
Yes.
Monday, March 31st.
It's Willa.
It's Willa. Filming is expected to run through October. Well, I believe British summertime also runs through October.
Oh, I see.
That means we certainly will be having to wait until 2026 before we get to see any action unfold on our own screens.
It's a long time of filming. I kind of get it. I kind of get it with I was going to say Game of Thrones, but this is of course House of the Dragon, because they have sort of like various locations and things. But did you see that the filming for the White Lotus took 7 months?
Really? I did not see that.
I was like, they were in Thailand for 7 months?
There was no dragons involved or anything.
Right. Well, to be fair, the dragons are CGI'd after the fact, but you know, it's the schlepping the actors around the world is the thing that takes some time, I would imagine.
True. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. That's good. It's always nice to have pointless speculation as to dates and parentage, even about things that aren't in the book themselves. Anyway, let's conclude this one. It is good to have Davos back. He's a treasured character. Although I was thinking about that. I wrote, he's a treasured character. And then I went, is he? I was like, I like him. I like him just fine. But then I think about his chapters and sometimes he's kind of dry. He's a foil to Stannis, but he is kind of like a mini-me to Stannis. I do think Liam Cunningham infects our impression of
Yes,
Davos, and I think
definitely.
that he made him lovable in a way that
I
he isn't
think
totally in the book.
the fact that Davos is still so self-effacing and
Yeah, that
still
always
so
helps.
feet on the ground, even though he's now a lord, I think that really endears him to people. And
Yeah,
he's so
good point.
honest and generally tries to do the right thing. I think all those things combine to make a very treasured character, I'll say.
Yeah, true enough. Chapter, not much happened really. I mean, basically we got Salladhor's abandonment of the cause, totally understandable. Not because
Right.
he isn't trustworthy, but because he's not stupid. And other fissures in Stannis' threadbare raiment. But Davos does look like he might be able to sort of... I think a different hand of the king might not get out of this mess, but I think Davos is going to. And it's partly because of his past. His
Sure.
seedy past makes him one of the people here, and they're going to let him go because of that. If he was Alistair
Florent, yeah.
for example, right? I think they might clap him in irons and sell him to Cersei.
Yeah, he came in, comes into the keep with his nose up, and
exactly.
He might end up down in those dungeons or something.
Yeah, see how you are after a couple of high tides down in the dungeons. Yeah.
Right. It is a bit morbid that George Martin is going to make us watch firsthand as Davos meets his fate. At least with Ned, we thought leading up to his execution, he was going to be able to take the black. It wasn't until Joffrey changed his mind at the last second.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Here
Davos, we know he's set to die because we were told that he dies in the previous book.
Unless there's subterfuge, we can always hold out for subterfuge, which might happen.
Very true.
I will say the book wouldn't have been as good if at the start, if in Ned 1 of A Game of Thrones, he'd said, first sentence, "This is Ned Stark. Don't get too attached. He's going to get his head cut off." I said, if the first sentence of Ned's first chapter in A Game of Thrones started with, "This is Ned Stark. Don't get too attached. He's going to get his head cut off before this book is over." That would have taken some of the sting out of it, but also some of the drama, I feel.
Yes, that's true. We would have been a little more prepared for it coming, but also not as shocked. I think Ned's death is probably one of the most shocking things in, present literature, media. The Game of Thrones, fans were shocked by it, and
it's sort of the literary equivalent of when John Travolta's gun goes off in the car in Pulp Fiction.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Just possible that we have a very prosaic answer to the question of Jon Snow's mother. But I will say, as I've said earlier, if all of these stories are true, then Ned was a very different character 15 years ago than he was when we got to know him.
Right.
Maybe that's what the rest of that thing would say. "This is Ned Stark. Don't get too attached." And he's very different than he was 15 years ago.
How many bastards does he have running around Westeros?
These are all his kids.
Are they all named John?
It's like George Foreman.
So, John, have we met your mother yet? I think the mother is yet unnamed, personally. Yeah. I don't think any of these three fit the bill. I think there's just too many plot holes.
Yeah. So anyway, the next chapter is John, so maybe he'll have some insight. But I mean, he doesn't know anything, so probably not.
Maybe he'll have a ghost dream, and that will clue him in some way.
Yeah. All right, there are 3 ways that you can help us out. You could leave us a positive review and a 5-star rating. You could buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhal. There you can become a sustainer at any of the various levels. There is a tier to match your budget and your interest. The upper tiers get you the always excellent spoilers. Or you can donate directly to our cause through our website, ghostsofharrenhal.buzzsprout.com.
And if you're looking for more ways to interact with us, well, one thing you could do is you could send us a text. The link is at the top of every episode's show notes. If you're interested in keeping up on the latest Ghost of Harrenhal news and developments, well, you can check us out on our social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Ghost Harrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.